Picture every national flag in the world, all flying together in one single enormous field. Red, blue, white, green, yellow, and black. Thousands of them waving together in the wind. Now look a little closer. Scan across all of them, because one particular color is almost completely, strangely missing. Scan across those flags again, and you will start to see the very same handful of shades appearing over and over. Red for courage and blood, blue for the sea and the sky, white for peace, green for the land. They repeat, faithfully, on nearly every banner ever raised by any nation. But out of the roughly 200 national flags flying in the world today, only 2 of them contain even the faintest trace of purple. Just 2. And in both of those, it is nothing more than a tiny hidden speck, tucked away deep inside a small central emblem. This is not a coincidence, and it is not simply because purple happens to look a little unusual next to bolder colors. There is a real, specific reason that purple is almost entirely missing from the flags of the world, and that reason lies buried deep inside thousands of years of human history. The reason is simple to say and strange to believe. For most of human history, purple was the single most expensive color on all of Earth, worth far more than its weight in gold. To understand why, you have to remember that long before dye factories existed, every single color came from nature, and nature does not give up a good, deep purple at all easily. Red could be pulled from the roots of certain plants, and from tiny crushed insects gathered by hand. Blue could be patiently coaxed out of indigo leaves and from a humble plant called woad. These colors were genuinely hard and slow to make, but crucially, they were reachable for ordinary people. But a rich, deep, glowing purple was something else entirely. It was almost impossible to produce. No common plant, no root, no leaf, and no berry would give it up. To make a true, lasting, brilliant purple, you needed one very specific and very unlikely source hiding out in the natural world. And that single source, astonishingly, was a sea snail. A small, spiny, unremarkable-looking shellfish, living quietly among the rocks in the warm waters of the Mediterranean Sea, whose ordinary little body secretly held the one ingredient that would go on to color the robes of emperors and kings. Around 3,500 years ago, the Phoenicians, a clever and famous seafaring people from the coastal city of Tyre, first discovered how to turn this humble snail into a precious dye. The magnificent color they created became known, all across the ancient world, as Tyrian purple. Each individual snail produced only a single tiny drop of a clear, unremarkable-looking mucus. But when that one small drop was carefully exposed to fresh air and warm sunlight, it slowly, gradually, and almost magically transformed itself into a deep, rich, and unmistakably glowing purple. But of course, one tiny drop is very nearly nothing at all. To properly dye even a single modest piece of cloth, you did not need dozens of these snails, and you did not need hundreds of them either. You needed thousands upon thousands upon thousands of them, all gathered by hand. By some historical estimates, it took as many as 10,000 of these sea snails just to produce a single gram of the finished dye. That was barely enough precious color to dye the narrow trim around a single robe. The simple arithmetic alone was enough to make purple an extraordinary luxury. And actually making the dye was genuinely miserable, unpleasant work. The snails were cracked open by hand and then left to slowly rot in giant open vats beneath the hot sun. The overpowering stench rising from the dye works was so strong it could be smelled from far outside the city walls. So the finished color carried every bit of that enormous cost within it. Gram for gram, true Tyrian purple could genuinely cost more than an equal weight of solid gold. A single full purple robe, richly dyed, might cost as much as an entire house, or in some cases even considerably more. Because of that staggering price, only the very richest and most powerful people on the whole of Earth could ever hope to wear it. Kings, queens, high priests, and emperors. And so, over time, purple slowly stopped being merely a color at all, and instead became a pure symbol of power itself. In ancient Rome, the emperors deliberately wrapped themselves in flowing purple. It instantly marked them out as the supreme rulers at a single glance, from all the way across a crowded room. The well-known Roman phrase "to take up the purple simply and directly" meant to become the emperor. The rules around it grew so extraordinarily strict that, at certain times in history, wearing purple without the proper permission was treated as a serious crime against the entire state. In some periods, An ordinary common person caught wearing true Tyrian purple could actually face execution for the offense. And the great obsession with the color did not simply fade away when Rome eventually fell. In the later Byzantine Empire, royal children were deliberately born inside a special palace chamber lined entirely with rare purple stone. These privileged infants were called born in the purple, marked out as rightful rulers from the very moment of birth. So for well over 1,000 long years, across empire after empire and dynasty after dynasty, purple consistently meant one single, unmistakable thing: great wealth, high rank, and the sacred right to rule over others. It was, quite simply, the one color that ordinary people were never allowed to touch. Now, hold that powerful idea firmly in your mind for a moment, and start to think carefully about what a flag actually has to be, and what it actually has to do. Because this is exactly where the strange story of the world's missing color really begins to make complete sense. A flag, you see, is not a single, priceless, precious robe, lovingly made just once for one individual ruler. A flag is something that has to be copied. It must be made again and again and again, by the hundreds and the thousands, for armies, for ships, for forts, and for towns. And a flag also lives an extremely hard and demanding life. It hangs outdoors for years on end, exposed to blazing sun, to driving rain, and to harsh salt wind out at sea. Whatever color it happens to be dyed with has to somehow survive all of that punishment without simply fading away. And purple, unfortunately, failed on absolutely every one of these practical tests. It was far, far too expensive to ever reproduce cheaply in bulk, and worse still, the natural dye was simply not stable over time. Left out in strong sunlight, that glorious purple faded quickly and sadly into a dull, muddy brown. No kingdom on earth, however fabulously wealthy it might have been, could ever have afforded to hand out an expensive purple banner to every single regiment and every single warship it commanded. It would have cost an absolute fortune, and within just a few short months, all those flags would look faded, tired, and cheap. So flags, sensibly, were built instead from the colors that were cheap, bold, reliable, and long-lasting. Strong, fiery reds from the madder plant and the cochineal insect. Deep, steady blues from indigo. And simple, honest, practical white. These were colors that virtually any nation could actually produce in real bulk. And so, gradually, over many centuries, those humble, practical colors slowly became the shared visual language of nations everywhere. Red, white, and blue, appearing again and again and again, not because anyone believed they were the most beautiful colors imaginable, but simply because they were reliably, affordably, the most possible. And here is the genuinely cruel little twist of timing in this whole story. By the time anyone on Earth had finally figured out how to make a good purple cheaply and easily, these deep flag traditions were already many hundreds of years old, firmly established, and effectively set completely in stone. The great and sudden change finally arrived in the year 1856, and remarkably, it did not come from a powerful king, or a mighty empire, or a wealthy merchant guild. Instead, it came entirely by accident, from a single teenager who was quietly doing a laboratory experiment that went completely and utterly wrong. His name was William Perkin, and he was just an 18-year-old chemistry student working away in London. He was not, in any way, trying to invent a new color at all. In fact, he was earnestly trying to discover a brand new cure for the deadly disease malaria, starting from ordinary coal tar. And his ambitious experiment simply failed. Instead of the life-saving medicine he had been chasing, young Perkin was left with nothing but a dark, sticky, and seemingly useless sludge sitting at the very bottom of his glass flask. But then, as he tried to clean the whole mess out, he suddenly noticed something truly astonishing. That dark, discarded sludge stained absolutely everything. It touched a brilliant, vivid, glowing shade of purple. Entirely by accident, this ordinary teenager had just created the world's very first synthetic dye, made in a laboratory rather than from nature. He proudly named his new color mauve, and it quietly changed everything that followed. Suddenly, and almost overnight, purple no longer needed 10,000 hand-gathered sea snails to exist. It could now be manufactured in a factory, mixed up by the barrel, and produced for very nearly nothing at all. The one color that had belonged exclusively to emperors was, at last, genuinely available to absolutely everyone. And mauve very quickly became an enormous craze. It swept dramatically through the whole world of fashion right across Europe. Even Queen Victoria herself was seen proudly wearing it in public. For a few dizzy years, the entire Western world seemed to be joyfully dressed, head to toe, in the once strictly forbidden color. But look very carefully at the timing of it all once again. All of this dramatic change happened right in the middle of the 1800s. And by that point in history, most of the world's established nations, along with their long-standing flags, already existed, with all of their colors chosen long ago. Purple had, at very long last, finally become cheap and plentiful, but tragically, it had completely missed its one great moment. The design and tradition of national flags was already a closed and settled matter. No great wave of proud new purple banners ever rose up to join all the established reds and blues. And that, in the end, is precisely why, even now, today, if you carefully look across all the flags of the entire world, purple is very nearly nowhere at all to be found. Out of every single national flag flying anywhere on the planet, only 2 of them carry any purple whatsoever. The very first is the flag of Dominica, a small and beautiful island nation nestled in the Caribbean Sea. Right at its center sits a Cicero parrot, a rare and protected native bird whose distinctive feathers shade gently and gracefully into a soft, deep, and unmistakably royal purple. And the second is the flag of Nicaragua. Tucked away and hidden inside its detailed central coat of arms is a small, delicate rainbow. And within the gentle curve of that little rainbow sits one thin, quiet band of violet, which is the only trace of purple anywhere on the entire flag. And honestly, even these 2 are not really purple flags, not in any true sense. In both cases, the color only appears as an accident, a byproduct of depicting a colorful bird or a natural rainbow, rather than a bold, deliberate choice. No nation on Earth ever truly set out to raise a genuinely purple banner. So the missing color is really a kind of fossil, a quiet reminder that for thousands of years, purple was simply too precious for a common flag, and by the time it finally became ordinary, the flags of the world were already finished and set. Next time you see one, remember the sea snails, the emperors, and the teenager who set purple free just a little too late.